What's up, guys? Dallas with Blade HQ. Today we're talking Reiff Knives. This is a brand new company, US made. To test these out, we brought in Kevin Estela. Kevin, tell us about you. Who are you?
Sure. I'm a lifelong outdoorsman, over 2 decades of experience teaching outdoor skills, survival instructor at a couple different companies over the years. Knife junkie. I am someone who will give a knife an honest test, a field test, make sure if it doesn't work for me, I'm not going to recommend it for you.
So we're going to take these out and we're going to do some bushcrafting skills. Kevin's gonna take us through some of those. He's actually going to show me a couple things. So without further ado, Kevin and I are going to go and change clothes and we're going to go out and we're going to do this. See you on the other side. All right, folks, we came up to Spanish Fort Canyon here in Utah. We're on private land, so we're not like defacing anybody's property. We're up here with permission on private land. We're gonna do some bushcraft and maybe some Bush-CAR-fting. That's the torture test. Stay tuned.
You know, every so often a knife comes out in the market that really gets me going. And this is one of those knives. This is the Reiff F4. And I've been seeing social media influencers and guys posting about this knife, but this is actually the first time I've had a chance to get my hands on it. And let me tell you, it doesn't disappoint. When I grab this knife handle, you can take a look at the handle contour. I immediately put my center of my palm in the center of the handle, and I was like, not a big fan of that because it's kind of wiggling around a little bit. But then I just kind of choked up a little bit forward of that Coke bottle contour and it locked it in a lot harder. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, can I do the same thing on the bottom? So I choked down and it locked it in the same way. So right off the bat, I'm like, there's something special about this blade. That longer handle, it seems like it's a little bit more handle biased than blade biased, but you're actually getting 2 handles out of one in a relatively small, compact handle profile. So I'm holding the blade like this and it's not moving around. And then I'm like, let me run this through my standard bushcraft grip test and see how it feels. So I've got my saber grip, my foil grip, my reverse grip. I've got my skinning grip. Every one of these is feeling really good. My extended grip for chopping. So it passes the handle test. Now, as far as fit and finish is concerned, I like the fact that this is removable in terms of just taking a small Torx screwdriver and removing the handle scales. Pretty impressive design. The screws are actually embedded deep down and the tang doesn't kind of create a little bit of a ridge, which create a hot spot for extended use. The sheath design is usually where I go to next. Locks in, very positive lock, no wiggle, and it passes the 1G test of will it just fall out when you invert it. Really interesting with this design is that the sheath actually swivels. And I started thinking about this in terms of like, from a standard draw position, if I had this on my belt, why would that be preferential to have a sheath that swivels? Well, I might be in a confined area. I might be trapped. And what if I couldn't draw my elbow up? What if I couldn't rotate my body? Well, if I could get my hand down to my leg, I can just turn the sheath upside down, draw it down, and now I have the blade out to go. So I thought that was pretty interesting with the design, was that the sheath is able to allow various ways of drawing the blade. Now, I'm planning on taking this knife and using it for a whole host of bushcraft tasks. What you normally would use a bushcraft knife for, but also we're gonna test it, we're gonna do a little bit of a torture test and see how it stands up to what some might call abuse. If you think about it, it's just use with an added AB to it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna test this to create some bushcraft tools. We're going to build fires. We're gonna use it like we normally would, but then we're gonna take it to the next level. We're gonna take it to 11, so to speak. So get ready, here we go. F4 from Reiff coming at you. Here we go, first test. We're gonna use the Reiff F4 to cut these saplings. Very easy skill. All you need to do is walk up to a sapling, take your palm, go palm down, hug these saplings underneath your arm, and you're gonna add a little bit of bend to them. I wanna flex the grain in the wood, and now I'm gonna take the knife and with a good hammer grip, I'm just gonna cut straight through. And you can see that this knife is cutting very easily through these saplings. If you get stuck, let me see if I can deliberately get stuck here, where the knife isn't cutting right through, just wiggle the blade. That's that whole reason why I didn't like the fact when I held it in the dead center, the knife wiggles, but I choke up a little bit and it locks it in place. So I get a good bend and I drive the knife straight through and it cuts these saplings like they're not even there. All right, another test for the Reiff F4 is using the chest lever grip. Often you'll get a sapling, but you don't need to use the full length. And many times you may think you don't have enough blade to chop this to the right length that you actually need. So you're gonna take your knife and you're gonna rotate it 90 degrees in your hand, putting the flat of the blade, or I'm sorry, your thumb against the flat of the blade, just like that. You're gonna bring everything up into your workspace up high like this, and you're gonna bring your elbows back, trying to like squeeze an imaginary orange between your shoulder blades, cutting just like this. Now, this knife is slicing beautifully, getting these nice clean cuts out of this willow. And over and over and over, that last one was more me than the blade. So this is working out great. Every so often when you get to the great outdoors, you'll find that the firewood isn't exactly what you like, right? And you might find that the outside of the wood is all wet, but we know where there's dry wood, and that's inside. So we're out here and this wood is pretty nasty looking. It's been sitting down here in the mud. It's covered in all sorts of debris. Even though the outside feels dry, I don't want to tempt anything. I want to try to get to the inside. So one of the tricks that you can do is you can do tip first splitting. And you got to be careful doing this. You can't do it with every single knife, especially one that doesn't have a good palm swell, but that's not the case with the Reiff F4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on to that knife, but I'm also going to cap the butt. And I'm gonna put the tip of the knife edge facing away, and I'm gonna pick up both the stick and the knife at the same time and drive it down in. And then I can split that wood. I can move it back, continue, move it back, continue, and I can get to that dry wood on the inside. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you do tip first splitting. Sometimes bigger is better, and this is the Reiff Knives F6. I'm not even gonna take this knife out of the sheath yet because I want to talk about the sheath. JRE Industries, they make this really nice drop sheath. It's not a dangler, although it will rotate. And that's actually a good design if you have a big knife on you, because typically when you put a big knife on your belt and it's a fixed leather sheath with a fixed belt loop and you sit down on something, that knife wants to ride up into your body. Where with a drop loop like this will rotate either way. So if you're driving your vehicle, getting on the back of a UTV, on a horse or whatever, you know that that knife is gonna work with your body, it's not gonna fight against you. Now, here's the fun part. Right off the bat, let's talk about form function here. Big idea. This knife definitely screams camp knife. You look at a lot of Scandinavian knives, and just from the silhouette alone, it looks like a luku, right? It looks like a big old camp knife, and that was really designed for multi-purpose utility in the campground, where you might be cutting up steak in one swipe, and you might be chopping wood with another. So this knife just screams, I can do more than a 4-inch blade. But here's the interesting thing about this knife. Even though it's got a good weight to it, it's not incredibly blade heavy. Like, I'm trying to balance this thing and it's roughly on that first screw right there. So it's not like it's fighting the grip of my hand. It's not like it's driving forward. It's comfortable, balanced right in my hand. It has a very similar Coke bottle contour, so I can choke forward and do fine work. I can choke back and I can chop with this thing. Of course, I'd want to put a lanyard on it to make sure that I'm not going to lose this blade mid-swing, because let's face it, it is still a 6-inch blade. I don't want that much steel whipping around. The way that this is ground is really, really nice. I'm looking at this knife from the butt to the self-guard and straight down that grind, and it's symmetrical. It's nicely done. What I like about this style of knife with this big belly, it almost looks like a hunting knife has been extended. And if I were to use this like a hunting knife to start scraping away at a hide, I have this big curve that makes nice long scrapes. And also I can get my whole hand on that blade to do this pinch grip. Comfortable handle. I don't have any fear that I'm gonna ride the blade. And it's 3V, again, sturdy construction. Not terribly heavy, and I'm ready to see what this sucker will do. This is the Reiff F6. And if you weren't paying attention, that's 2 more than the F4. Okay, so sometimes you're out in the wilderness, sometimes you're roughing it, sometimes you are testing yourself, right, getting your adventure on. Sometimes you're in a public campground, and maybe there's a rule against collecting, harvesting from the vegetation around you. You may have to use this stuff, gas station wood. You may not be able to get all the tinder that you need from the land, but you can make your own, and that's a realistic use for this knife. So what I'm gonna do is baton through this wood using this knife, and this should test out the realistic everyman use for the Reiff F6. I'll tell you, having that extra 2 inches on this blade from what I'm used to, what I like, makes it easy to get this blade all the way past the wood and give me a place where I can actually hit it. Something that you guys should know about batoning, everyone thinks it's abuse, right? Or a lot of people think it's abuse. It's actually just good use of a knife. And as long as you keep this blade horizontal, you're not putting a lot of pressure on the steel as if you were to do it this way or this way. So you'll notice when I'm batoning, if I let this blade go like this, I'll tap it and readjust before I really bear down on it again. So this is a great knife for the everyman who is car camping with his family and ends up at the gas station, gets some wood and has to process it into all the different sizes of wood for fuel before he makes a fire. So there's really no magic to fire starting, right? It's basic science. And we know that when we start a fire, you gotta start off with tinder, and then you work your way through kindling, small fuel, medium-sized fuel, and your main fuel. So we're here at our established little campsite, and I just wanna show you 3 different ways that you can scrape your ferro rod, because a lot of people think you just hold one in one hand, one in the other, and move them, but there's actually a technique to it. So the first thing I can do on these 3 different cotton balls down here that have been impregnated with Vaseline is I can push the knife towards my ferro rod, but there's always a chance when you do that that you hit material that's in your fire pit. So I gotta be careful when I do this, but I can get a fire going. I can also hold the knife in place and draw the rod back. So it's more like a lawnmower action like this. And that tends to work really well to keep my hand out of my fire pit. The last way that I can show you how to get a fire going, if I just move this over here, is I can actually pin down the material with the blade, the edge, and I can draw my ferro rod across the top. And that is how you can scrape a ferro rod 3 different ways using the Reiff Knives F4.
All right, guys, you've seen the test. We put this through its paces. We put these knives through their paces. They function very, very well for your bushcraft needs. Now, this is the test you've stuck around for. We're going to throw them, stab them, fling them, chunk them, everything else into this car. This is the torture test. Let's get to it. And go. Woo! You ready? One more. All right, folks, as you can see, it did make a couple little holes. It didn't blunt the tip that much at all. Took a tiny bit of it off, but I mean, that'd be expected, but it did not do anything to that blade.
Okay, ready?
We're gonna die, man.
Well, you can tell that and there's just a couple hot spots, right? I can see just here. I mean, but there's no real damage done to that edge. Nothing that a few passes on a stone or a strop can fix. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Yes. All right, guys, we just threw these knives, stabbed these knives, batoned these knives into a Lincoln town car. All right, now Kevin's gonna take the F6 and he's gonna see if the F6 will cut the seat belt.
You know what I like about this knife? I mean, it's got traditional bushcraft style and shape, but there's a difference between bushcraft and survival. Like, bushcraft is what you do for fun, survival's in an emergency, and you might be wondering, like, why the hell would you cut through a car? But if you had to, you've got the confidence that your knife could do it if you had to.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I'm impressed, man. This thing it's got my seal of approval.